Hey guys, welcome back to MassiveSynth.com tutorials. This is part 4, the final part of the trap feature I've been doing this month on Massive, and in this tutorial I was going to show you how to synthesize some snares and some claps. Basically what I had playing there was this snare body and layered on top this snare top and the clap sound, which combined these three sounds, just layered up, and that's with no processing on any of these massive synths whatsoever. It's just outside processing, no third party plugins or anything, so just the raw sounds just synthesized really. So we'll start off with the snare body. So this is just the kind of lower end of the sound, just the kind of, I guess, the lower end weight, and then these guys are just going to take care of the sort of mids and high mids just to kind of fill the sound out really. So let's open up this Massive here, and let's start off by creating a new sound, and we're actually going to use the noise oscillator for this sound and a couple of other wavetables. So we can start off in oscillator 1 slot and take the pitch down by 1 octave, and then use a sine square and keep the wavetable position all the way to the right, so it's a square wave, intensity on full, and amp we can start modulating straight away really. So pull the amp down to 0 and drag the crosshair of envelope 2 to the first modulation slot of this oscillator. We're going to use envelope 1 to modulate the noise amp. And let's just create a percussive envelope here really. So take the sustain off and sharpen up that attack, and that's it really. And yeah, let's actually, in this first modulation slot here, click and drag up to around 2/3 of the way round, so something like that. And turn on oscillator 2 next, take the pitch of this down by 1 octave, and going to go for a sine triangle, keeping the wavetable position all the way to the right. So we've got a blend of a square and a triangle really, and just duplicate the rest of the settings, intensity on full, and use this kind of envelope 2 to modulate the amp of this oscillator, and click and drag up to a similar amount. And let's go over to the voicing section next, monophonic, and just restart via gate, no glide. So next up we can set up this noise oscillator here. I'm going to actually change the noise type to bright noise, which is just a bit thinner, less kind of mid-rangey. So we've got the mid-range covered in these oscillators, and let's use envelope 1 to modulate the amp of this noise. So click and drag the crosshair of envelope 1, first modulation slot on the amp of this noise, click and drag up to full. So now I've got some noise on there, and let's do a very similar thing with this envelope here, sharp attack, no sustain, but actually give this envelope a bit more decay. And set up the amp envelope now as well, just to make sure it's kind of really percussive, sharp attack again, no sustain. And the final thing to do with this sound really is to just add some effects, so a little bit of reverb, and just pull this dry wet down to around 1/4 of the way up. Pull the size down a little bit, push the density and colour up. And let's just EQ this sound a little bit, so I can pull some of the bottom end down a bit. With the frequencies, the kind of lower mid frequencies, I'm going to do a bit of a boost on these. So hopefully boosting some of that area a little bit. And maybe push the high shelf up too. And one final thing to add with the sound actually is some feedback. Push that amp right up and just kind of beefs the sound up quite nicely. Probably take that boost down now. And some sample and hold as well. Found this had a really nice effect on the sound. Just pitched up to full. So that mastered down. I noticed we were clipping a little bit there, and it's not the most exciting sound ever, but it's, you know, with a bit more EQ, it's quite a nice sort of body sound for a snare. If you're layering up your own kind of synthesized snare, it's just quite nice to have something like that. And we can also add a velocity macro to the amp. So we've actually got a velocity sensitive kind of drum sound there, which is pretty cool. And I've actually got these hits playing on F. Just found the kind of like on the F point, it was just that had the nicest kind of like response basically in tone and stuff. Okay. One final thing I might do actually is just listen to that snare body. Just on these oscillator 1 and 2, the envelope we've got here, just pull this decay down a bit. So that body sound is a little bit tighter, so play it together now. Those oscillators are a little bit more subtle in the mix of that snare. So next up we can look at the snare top. Okay, so for the snare top, let's create a new sound. And start by adding a sine wave in the oscillator 1 slot. Go for sine square. Take the pitch down 1 octave. Pull the wavetable position to the left. Intensity on full, and pull the amp down, and let's modulate the amp with an envelope again. Click and drag the crosshair, this first envelope, first modulation slot on oscillator 1 of the amp, and click and drag up, and just control this amp level a little bit. So I'd say click and drag up so you've got the blue bar going up to, it's kind of pointing at the A there, so just getting a little bit of a sine wave in there. And let's look at this first envelope, make it percussive, take the sustain off, sharp attack. And let's pull this decay down a little bit as well. And another thing we can do here is go to the amp envelope straight away and do a similar kind of envelope. No sustain, sharp attack, a bit less decay this time. So decay's around 1/3 of the way. And let's use this to modulate the pitch of this first oscillator. Click and drag up. So we've got +12 on that pitch modulation. It's quite quiet at the moment. We're getting, boost the volume up momentarily. Yeah, we're just getting that kind of blippy sort of sound, which is just going to help with this snare top sound. So we can move over to the voicing section next. Just make sure it's monophonic. And let's take this glide off. Check the restart via gate. And let's move over to this noise oscillator next. Select the bright noise option again. Just pull the colour down to around 3/4 of the way. Push the amp up. It's sounding quite cool now. So let's set up some distortion in this first effect slot, and then go for classic tube and just drive it quite hard. So dry wet nearly on full, drive on 3/4. Add a bit of reverb next. Just pull the dry wet right down, size down a bit, push the density and colour up to full. It's becoming quite nice. It's like halfway between a snare and a clap really. So add some EQ and just roll off some of the low shelf and just boost some of these mids and push the high shelf up a bit, just giving a bit more tops on the sound. And I go for some insert effects as well. Going to go for the sample and hold again and pushing the pitch right up. It's having a really nice effect on the sound. You can actually control the sort of the kind of tone and colour of this clap or snare using this pitch. Add it just past 3/4, sounding quite nice. And add a bit of bit crusher as well. And I might need to go to the routing section now and just check that insert 2 in there. To activate that insert 2 so it's now in a signal path for this sound. Add a bit of feedback too. Maybe go a bit more subtle with the bit crusher just so it's not kind of destroying the sound so much. And there's our snare top. Add that to the body. And one final thing is you can do the velocity as well. Move that down. Okay, so that's the snare top sorted. Final thing to do here is make this clap sound. Let's load up this massive. Okay, so for this clap sound, I wanted quite, building that snare, I wanted quite a nice sort of crunchy sort of top end for the sound. So I thought, something like that. It's just going to fill the higher frequencies of that snare stroke clap that we're building, just using massive quite nicely. So, and actually this time using a performer to control the envelope of the amp, it just gave it quite a nice effect. So let's start off, create a new sound, and we're not going to use any of these oscillators, just the noise generator really. So turn that oscillator off, and for the noise I kept it as a white noise because it just seemed to have a bit more kind of body and sort of colour really. So go straight for this amp envelope, sharp attack and no sustain, and yeah, keeping the decay around halfway. So just getting a bit of white noise in there. So let's pull the amp down to 0 for this noise and set up this performer in here. So I'm going to set up this performer, sync it 1/16, and I just want to keep one of those triangle shapes, move this X phase sequence to the top so it's just this kind of triangle or sawtooth wave really that we're going to be using for this performer. Drag the crosshair of this performer to the first modulation slot on the amp of the noise generator and just click and drag up to full. So we just get quite a nice percussive sort of sound using that performer. And I found it to be tighter than just setting that amp envelope and having a tighter decay. I found if I just take that off now, having that performer just really tightens up the sort of tail of this clap sound. It sounded pretty cool. So and we can add some effects to this sound really, just to kind of finish it off. So went for the Brawner tube on this one, dry wet around 3/4, drive halfway, and a bit of reverb. Just pull the dry wet right down. And also added some insert effects, so bit crusher in the first slot. And just keeping both the dry wet and the crush around halfway seemed to work quite well. And a bit of feedback too, and just pull this amp amount up to around 1/4. And just check the voicing as well, monophonic. Obviously we're not going to get any glide with the noise, but it's just kind of standard practice when I'm kind of synthesizing drums to just kind of have them as monophonic and just no glide on them whatsoever. And yeah, just the velocity macro over to the sidechain slot on the amp, so we've got kind of velocity sensitive drum hit now. And there we have our kind of 3 sounds really. Let's play them together. So we've got, if we look at the kind of frequency analyzer there, and the multimeter. So we've got, you know, a nice bit of body, some mids and some tops just with those 3 sounds. I mean, obviously, like, they're just kind of completely dry sounds in massive, not processed or EQ'd outside of massive, or, you know, compressed or distorted, apart from just using the kind of massives inbuilt stuff. So you could take that further and add a bit more stereo width to some of those sounds, bounce them down and, you know, put them in a sampler and stuff. But just the kind of essence of synthesizing your own snares and claps using massive is hopefully there a little bit, and just giving you some good pointers onto how to kind of approach that kind of snare or clap drum synthesis with massive. So okay, so I hope you enjoyed that tutorial. Any questions, then please get in touch, let us know. And yeah, thanks for watching. I hope to see you again soon. Cheers, bye.